Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and if you're across the world, it might be good morning. But we are so glad that you joined us. So come on in, come on in. We're just so happy to have all of you. Tonight or this afternoon is going to be an amazing, amazing presentation by Bill Bronchick. Bill is just such an expert in all areas of real estate and this creative financing. I'm telling you, Bill, I think the time is perfect to go over this with what's happening in the market. Do you want to greet everybody?
Welcome, everybody. God bless you all who attend tonight. You're going to receive some amazing revelations, information, and understanding about some great real estate topics. So I look forward to sharing with you.
We look forward to it. Also, we've got Troy Peterson with us. Troy is such an amazing real estate coach and friend, and just has such a wealth of information between him and his amazing wife, Eileen. Do you want to greet everybody, Troy?
Thanks so much, Karen. It's so good to be here. I always look forward to hearing from Bill, and I know what he's going to share is relevant to the market today for the opportunities that are out there for you. This really is a season of opportunity for us to jump in. So really enjoy, be ready to take notes and soak up everything you can tonight.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love this. We've got people I didn't even ask, and you know what to do. Please let us know where you're tuning in from so I can give you a shout out. We at Wealth Builders, on behalf of Billy and Becky Epperhart, we appreciate you so much, and we consider you our Wealth Builders family. So I'd love to connect and be able to just see who's all on. And we've got Myra who is tuning in. We're so glad to have you. We've got Sherry. Hello, Jerry and Sherry from our coaching family from OKC, Oklahoma City. So glad you're on. And Myra, thank you. You're from Grass Valley, California. I love to see that too. We've got Yannick who is joining us from Montreal, Canada. Welcome, Yannick. We've got Tina tuning in from Chicago. So good to see you. Welcome, Michael. You are in from North Carolina. Oh, Brian, so good to see you and Renee. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Great to see you. Sheila is tuning in from Southern Maryland. Welcome, Sheila. So glad to see you. And as you're all posting where you're coming in from, I want to just remind you that this is, oh, hello, Faith from Duggar. Okay, that's Dan Dyer's territory. Way to go. I was just talking to Dan last night. So I just want to remind you that this is an interactive webinar. And what I mean by that is we are going to leave some time at the end of this to be able to answer some questions for you. Because this is, once you hear things, there's probably questions that are going to come up. But also, I'm excited for this weekend. We've got the real estate workshop that is coming up this weekend from Friday through Sunday. And I just have to tell you that this is the highest attended real estate workshop ever in person. And I think there's something in the market right now. There's something stirring. So we're just so excited to see all of you. And if you cannot join us in person, we've got a live stream option, and you get to watch that live stream for up to 3 weeks. We actually provide that for people in person as well. We'll do some Q&As and be able to answer your questions. So it's going to be a great weekend. Just a couple more shout outs here. We've got Krista tuning in from Ohio. Hello, Dale. Thanks for tuning in from Seattle. And we are just so grateful for all of you. Feel free to comment, put your questions in the chat. And we are looking forward to a very informational and always inspiring, of course, presentation from Bill Bronchick. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Hey, it's funny you mentioned Dan Dyer. I got an email from code enforcement in Colorado Springs about one of my houses. His name was Dan Dyer.
Oh my God.
Same spelling. I called the guy just for kicks, and I said he would happen to be related.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
no. So, all right. Thanks for joining us, Troy. We'll excuse you. You can go have dinner. But
But
thanks. It's
you'll
good
be
to see
back
you
at the
here.
end,
Be
right?
back at the end, and I'll see you this weekend too. Good seeing you, Troy.
Yes, all right.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And let me pull up my PowerPoint. I do have one. It's about how to buy houses without banks or credit and create cash flow without tenants. Creative real estate financing, which is this is a subset of creative real estate financing, which I'll be talking about this week at the Wealth Builders Real Estate Workshop, my favorite event to do every year. I believe it's twice a year, right? So it's twice a year. I got the privilege and pleasure of teaching there, meeting people, interacting, and just getting great revelations and just meeting wonderful people that I really enjoy, because everybody's so gracious and grateful at the Wealth Builders events, which is really great. It's a change, it's a change from some of the secular audiences I sometimes speak to in real estate, where they're just like, gimme, 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 I need, I want. And people at Wealth Builders are so appreciative and respectful, about, their questions and so forth. So I really appreciate you folks, and I appreciate you joining in. All right. So first thing I want to answer is now a good time to invest in real estate? That's what a lot of people wonder. You've got a lot of things going on in the world. We've got a new president, we've got tariffs, we've got the stock market going up and down and up and down. But you know what? In the last 3 months, while the stock market went like this, up and down and up and down, my tenants just paid their rent on time and never made a difference. That's one of the things I love about real estate. You wake up in the morning and Iran's got a nuke, or Russia just invaded more territory, or Trump put out a tweet and the stock market goes up or down 1,000 points. Real estate doesn't do that. I know real estate does go up and down, but it doesn't do it on a whim. It's a long, slow process. It's like turning around an ocean liner. If you fall off an ocean liner, you're gone. They can't just turn around and get you. It takes them like a mile to turn around, and that's the way the real estate market is. So when something's going to change, you're going to see it, and it's going to move in a direction very slowly. If it's up, down, sideways, whatever. So let's just look at what's going on in the market. So first of all, there is no housing market. You have to understand that it's all location. So what's going on in where I am in Colorado Springs, or my office is in Denver, what's going on in LA, San Francisco, Baton Rouge, Orlando, Trenton, New Jersey, it's all a different market. Every market is unique. And even within a market, there are sub-markets. There are expensive houses, there are cheap houses. There's the north side, there's the west side, there's the east side. So there's things going on even within markets that you can't just generalize that things are going in this trend or this direction. Interest rate are trending downwards, even though temporarily now they just popped up again. But I think that's because of the bond yield, which determines the interest rates. It's the long-term bond yield, not the Fed rate. Even though when the Fed cuts rates, that's the short-term rate, it usually equates to drops in interest rates and mortgages, but not always. It follows more of the long-term bond yield, which went up when the stock market took a tank and a hit after Trump announced all the tariffs, and then things kind of smoothed out over the next couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens there. But I see towards the end of the year, as the Trump administration starts making trade deals with a lot of countries, that every one of those dominoes starts to fall, then everybody calms down and the market gets more normal, and then that long-term bond yield comes down, okay, which will bring interest rates down. But either way, as we'll discover, it's not going to matter that much. There are a limited number of houses for sale. Still, we have a supply problem. Static supply and increasing demand. If interest rates go down, these are national factors. Housing is still local, but these are some of the national factors that affect everybody. So when interest rates go down, it's cheaper to buy, so more people buy, and that brings up demand. There are a limited number of houses for sale. Now, it's different market by market, city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood, but generally speaking, we have a pretty low supply of homes for sale. And it's been that way for over 10 years. Over 10 years, we've had that problem. And while sometimes you see headlines on social media, or on the internet, or on TV, or CNBC, talking about, inventory went up 50% over the last 12 months in this market. Well, first of all, it's only one market. And second of all, remember, inventory has been so low. It's been about 20% or less in some markets 10% of normal. So if the normal supply of houses in a market, let's say, is 10,000 homes for sale, and it goes down to 1,000 homes for sale, and then they say it went up 100%, it's still only 2,000. It's 20% of normal. We're still far below normal, what we need to keep up with demand. So that's what's keeping the bottom from dropping out. And a lot of sellers are not selling. This spring, I noticed a lot of homes came up for sale, as they always do in the spring, but still not as much as normal because sellers are waiting for interest rates to fall, so buyers will pay more for a house because they can afford more with a lower interest rate, and therefore they can get more of a price for their house. A lot of sellers are sitting on a 3% loan with no rush to sell, and that's what's keeping inventory low, the number of houses for sale. Also, of course, we know basic economics: when demand is better than supply, housing values go up, which is the trend now. If we look at this is a long-term diagram which I dug up from 1950 to 2024. Look at this. Almost every single year, with the exception over, let's see, that's I could do a little math there, over 74 years, only 7 years did prices go down. Every other year, prices went up. So if we look at, like, of course, 2008, that was a 12% drop. That was the big one, the biggest one of all the drops, and the only real significant one, 5.3% in 2007. But if we look at 78, 79, 77, 14%, 15%, 13% increase. If we look at 2001 or 2000, really, all the way through 2005, we saw almost double digit every year. And since then, we've seen increasing 2020, 2021, 19%. That was a weird year because of COVID, but real estate increases at or better than the pace of inflation year after year after year after year. It's one of those almost guaranteed. There's no guarantee of anything in this life, except for death and taxes, they say, right? Both of which are negotiable, of course. You can negotiate taxes with the IRS, right? And life, well, it's everlasting as long as you believe, right? So death and taxes, both negotiable. Just a little humor there to lighten up the situation. It doesn't matter how you time the market, is my point. It's how much time you are in the market. I have made more wealth from real estate, from appreciation over the last 30 years, than I have from all the houses I flipped, all the houses I rented, all the deals I did. I made more wealth in just the increase in market value and the increase in equity in my properties than anything else. My biggest regret is in the first 10 years, I flipped too many houses. I should have kept some of those. We were buying houses in the early 90s in downtown Denver on a credit card. I bought a house on an American Express card for $7,000 and flipped it for 15. Now it's got to be worth at least 400 to 500 in that neighborhood. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So again, the concept of dollar cost averaging in the stock market applies to real estate. Things go up, things go down. You buy it on the top, you buy it on the bottom. You try to time it a little better with real estate because it's a little easier to predict than the stock market up and downs. But as you buy, some in the middle, some at the bottom, some towards the top, in the long run, it's always going up on an upward angle, almost without exception, right? And if you doubt that, how many of you would like to buy your parents' house, the one you grew up in, for the price they paid for it now? My parents bought a house in Long Island, New York, that we grew up in for $63,000. $63,000 in 1970. That house is worth about 1.8 million now. 1.8 million. That's obscene. It's also great for the people who probably kept it all that time, but I think we sold it mid 70s for, like, I don't know, maybe $100,000, maybe $100,000. I don't know. The cost of inaction. Look at this. In 1971, mortgage rates were 7.33, pretty close to what they are now. And a lot of people just waiting for that interest rate to come down. Well, if you waited until interest rates went down, it wasn't until 1993 that they really dropped. You would have missed out on building wealth. Meanwhile, the value of real estate quadrupled during that time period. Again, it's not how much you time the market, although that is an important thing. It's not as important as how long you are in the market time-wise. So they say real estate is about location, location, location. That's an old adage, and it is still true to some extent, but it's also just as important and maybe more important these days about financing, financing, financing. Look, if you can't get the money to purchase the homes, then it's all pipe dream, right? Well, I'm going to show you some ways where you can do it without having to go qualify for a loan. Go to a bank, borrow money at 7.3% or so. That's about right. A little higher, maybe some loans for investors. And most people don't want to do that. Some people can't do it because there's the old conundrum as an entrepreneur, we have is, how do you look broke to the IRS and you don't make any money, and then walk into a lender and say, lend me money, I make money? That's the old conundrum. How do we do both? It's a difficult thing. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can do that. And there are limits of bank financing. Number one, you're going to run out of cash. The minimum down payment for any investor loan is 20% down. Now you can do zero down VA loan, 3.5% down FHA loan, but only if you live in the property. Even FHA has investor loans where like you can buy like a duplex or a fourplex, live in one unit and rent out the other three, and they'll lend you 96.5% of the purchase price, only 3.5% down. You could do that, but you gotta live in it. You gotta live in it. So there's no non-owner occupied loans with less than 20% down in this market right now. Secondly, you're going to run out of credit because you keep using your credit, you're going to use it up. You'll run out of available loans. The best loans are the ones that are underwritten to conventional standards, which is Fannie, Freddie, the two big mortgage giants who come up with all the rules for conventional loans. And there's only 4 you can get through them as an investor. In fact, if you have one on your home already that's owned by Fannie or Freddie, you only get 3. By the way, how do you know if your loan is owned by Fannie or Freddie? Because you may be paying a servicer, because Fannie and Freddie do not service their own loans, and it could be owned by Fannie or that's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So if you Google, how do I know if my loan is owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac? That's FNMA, FHLMC. That's the abbreviations. And you will see the web page that comes up where you could put your address in, and it'll tell you if your loan is owned by Fannie or Freddie. And that means you only have 3 loans that you can borrow from Fannie or Freddie. So you're going to run out of available loans. Now you can go to credit unions, you can go to non-conventional lenders like Wells Fargo and Chase, but there's different. It's always 20% down, and it's always full documentation, which means credit score, tax returns, W-2s, and if you're self-employed and your tax return looks like you don't make any money, good luck getting a loan. It's easy when you have a huge monster salary, but also you're getting destroyed in taxes when you're doing that. So if you're making 400 grand a year in a W-2, yeah, it's easy to get a loan. But if you're a self-employed person, it's very difficult. Okay. So also interest rates are a bit high. And I said that, don't let that dissuade you, but it is a limit of bank financing. It's a different story 5 years ago when you can buy a property with a 3 or 4% loan. Your payment was almost half of what it is now as a rental property, and you can make cash flow. Now it's in some markets like where I live, you can't even break even. In Denver, you can't buy, a $600,000-$700,000 house, which is pretty typical, 20% down, 80% loan, and at 7+%, the rent won't even cover that with taxes, insurance, and maintenance and all that. Won't even cover it. So the interest rates are too high in some markets, not all markets, but some markets. So what we're going to do is learn to leverage existing loans that are out there at low interest rates using creative financing. So get this one. This is some interesting stats. 62% of existing mortgages out in the market are under 4%. 25% of them are under 3%. So there's only a small number of loans that are, I mean, 38% of loans are over 4%. And if we look at what's over 6%, it's under 10% of the total loans out there. So most loans are under 5, under 4, under 3, some even in the 2s. I've come across those once in a while. As people got a loan in the 2s. So how do we leverage what's already out there instead of going and borrowing new? Now, don't get me wrong. If you have, or you're in the middle of putting 20% down and borrowing from a lender at 7+%, I'm not going to say don't do that. That's crazy. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are limits to that method. You're going to run out of the 20% down. You're going to run out of credit, and you're going to run out of the existing loans available to you as an investor. And if you're self-employed and you show not much income, it's going to be tough. Going to be tough. So these are ways I'm going to show you where you don't need to qualify. You don't need to show income. You don't even need to show credit. Okay. So we're going to go after these. So the advantages of creative financing, number one, is it doesn't require you to have good credit or any kind of credit. Some people watching have very good credit. You have an 800 FICO score. Congratulations. Go borrow 3 mortgages. It'll drop to 730. By the way, there's virtually no loan in the world that requires more than a 730 FICO. So people who say, I have an 850 FICO, congratulations. It doesn't really get you anything. Maybe it gets you like a better credit card deal or something like that than someone who has 750. I don't think so. I think 730 is excellent credit, and that's all you need for any mortgage loan, that's for sure. A faster closing. If you've got a motivated seller, and that's who we deal with here, motivated sellers who need, they're don't wanters. They need to sell now. Like next week would be fine. You can promise a faster closing because we're not waiting for bank approval on a loan and an appraisal and underwriting and all that jazz. No loan costs. This is a big one. So lenders say there's no cost for the loan. They're really not telling you the truth. They're charging you fees, but they're wrapping it into the loan amount that you're borrowing on top of what you're borrowing, and or they're charging you a higher interest rate. So the way it works, if you go to a mortgage broker, they get a rate sheet every morning sent to them from the banks that are lending money that they're brokering. And if it says, these are the qualifications, someone with a 730 FICO can prove income and all that jazz, and the rate for that person is 7.25. Well, the mortgage broker says, no fees, not even me, free, 7.5. See what they did there? They marked you up 0.25%. And you realize that 0.25% on a $500,000 mortgage over 30 years is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, which the mortgage broker gets kicked back at closing. So they're still making $6,000, $7,000, even though they told you free. And by the way, go explain this to your mortgage broker that you know this and watch the blood drain out of their face, because nobody knows this because they think it's free. It's not free. Same thing, car dealers do it too. That's why car dealers hate when you walk in and say, I'm paying cash. They hate it because they're getting loans from credit unions for you, and they get a kickback on the interest rate markup. So just an FYI. Number 4, no personal liability. Gee, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to personally be on the hook for a loan? Even if you wanted to borrow money with your LLC or your corporation, the lender's going to make you sign personally on the note. Even if you put 30 or 40% down, if you put maybe 50% down, you can get away with without a personal guarantee. But why is that important? Well, if things do go south, like they did in 2009, there were a lot of people who borrowed 100% loan to value, and the property dropped 30 or 40% in value overnight. Not overnight, it took like a year or two, but if it's worth 300 and all of a sudden, and you borrow 300, zero down, which they were offering back then, and the property now is worth 200, you're underwater by 100 grand and you're in bankruptcy court. So if things go bad and you can just walk away, freeing, from any liability, that's a protection strategy. That's self-protection. It's a good thing. And of course, the sky is the limit. We can do what I'm going to be describing tonight over and over and over again as a formula, repeating and scaling without worrying about, like, is the bank going to give me another loan, right? Is the loan committee going to approve me for just one more loan? Don't have to worry about that, all right? So some of the strategies we're going to talk about tonight is what we call buying with OPM. And then we're going to talk about how to create cash flow. I talked about without tenants, by selling on what's called a wrap. Now you can buy on a wrap too, but that's an advanced strategy. I'll save that for the workshop. And I got a limited amount of time. Let me see what time it is. Oh, I'm yakking away. It's 4:26 already. All right, so let's get into it. OPM, what does OPM stand for? Those of you who are in the chat, let's hear if you what OPM stands for. One, two, three, misspelled. Sorry. I'm a stickler for punctuation and word usage and spelling. I have to be, because I was tortured in law school with that. I thought I was a good writer until I went to law school and they said, "You stink, Bronchick, you stink." Everybody said the same thing. Other people's money. Actually, in some circumstances, yes, but in this scenario, we're talking about something different. We're talking about other people's mortgages. Other people's mortgages. How to leverage other people's mortgages, which is buying the property subject to the existing mortgage. So you may have heard this before, this expression being thrown around on social media or from seminars or books or people who are investors, buying a property subject to. Sometimes for short they call it sub to. SUB, the number 2, sub to. What does that mean? What that means is the seller transfers ownership of the property from seller to you, buyer. And how do we transfer ownership? Maybe you get someone in the chat to participate. What document do you use to transfer ownership? In a car, it's a title, right? What do you use to transfer ownership of real estate? What do we call that document? That's right, Krista was the first. A deed. So there's different types of deeds. There's a warranty deed and a bargain and sale deed and a quitclaim deed and a grant deed in California, but not relevant for a discussion. It's a deed, generically a deed. Yeah, so the seller signs a deed, hands it to you, and transfers ownership. Now, usually at closing, when you do that, you get a deed from the seller when you buy at closing. You pay off the seller's mortgage. If the seller doesn't have one, that's different. If the seller has a mortgage, you're going to bring in money, probably not yours, probably your lender's money, or some of yours and some of your lenders, and you're going to use that money to pay off the seller's existing mortgage so they can transfer you the property without a mortgage on it, so you can go ahead and put your lender's mortgage against the property as a new lien. So we're not going to pay off the existing mortgage. Okay, what we're going to do is we're not going to assume the loan either. That's some of you are wondering, well, what does that mean? Do I assume the loan? I call the bank and say, put me on the hook and take the seller off. That's called an assumption. That's not what we're doing here, because to do that, you need to go through the qualifying process just like a new loan. The only benefit to that is if it has some pay down on it. So it was a 30-year mortgage and it's been paid down for 8 years. You only have 22 left. That's pretty good. But if the interest rate is 3%, and you want to assume it, which may be a good idea if the price is right on the property. Not only do you have to qualify, but they're going to push the interest rate up to market. Now, the only exception to that, there's two types of loans where they don't do that. FHA and VA don't do that. You can keep an existing 3% mortgage in place. But here's the catch. You got to live there. As an investor, you can't assume a VA or FHA mortgage as an investor. You have to live in the property, and you can't lie. You'll get caught. You get in a lot of trouble. That's loan fraud. You don't want to do that. You continue making the payments on the seller's existing loan. Now, do you pay it to the seller? That's a technical thing, but let's just say I'll answer that quickly. No, we're going to pay it directly to the lender, as if we were them, and the property is yours. You own it. Why? Because you got a deed transferred to you. Now, a lot of people have I don't really understand. The mortgage is in this guy's name and the deed is in my name. How does that work? Let me show you how. The lender still has a lien against the property. It looks like this for the visual people. So we've got here, grab my pen. We've got here a property, right? And the property has an owner. That's the borrower when they bought it, right? How did they get ownership? By a deed from the previous seller. And they signed a note, which is the debt to the lender. That's like an IOU. Okay. Now the lender wants collateral for that IOU, and that's the mortgage lien against the property. So the deed is in the borrower's name. The bank has a lien against the property. So people say, I don't really own my house. The bank owns it until I pay it off. That's not accurate. That's not accurate. You own the property, the borrower, if you're the borrower. The bank has a lien against it. It's kind of like, people think like the car business where they hold on to title till you pay it off and then you get the title. That's not how it works in real estate. You have the title in your name, the deed. The bank has a lien against it. Okay. Now, if we come along as an investor, what we're going to do is now take ownership of that property by the borrower, now the seller, transferring ownership by executing a new deed of ownership to you. Now, note, you own the property. The lender still has a lien. Did you sign the note? No. Are you personally liable for that note? No. Will it even report on your credit? No. It's going to continue reporting on the seller's credit report. Not your, first of all, you're not going to buy it in your own name anyway, unless you're going to live there. You'd buy it in a corporate entity like an LLC. So, number one, you're not personally on the hook, because one of the things we talked about earlier, seller still is. And some of you might be thinking, what kind of crazy person would do such a thing? Transfer ownership to me and still be on the hook for the mortgage and still be on his credit? Are you crazy? Yes, the seller would have to be crazy to do this. We're really motivated. Really motivated. And your typical seller is going to be, first of all, someone who's either A, behind in payments already, so there's no objection about what happens if you don't make my payment. No, or number two, there's probably no equity and they can't make the payment themselves anymore. And in their mind, they're thinking, I'm just going to walk away and let the bank take it in foreclosure. And you say, wait a minute, wait. If you do that, your credit is destroyed for years. Why don't you let me take the ownership of the property? I'll give you a little cash and I'll take over your 3% loan and I'll make up your back payments while I'm at it. So what does that do for the seller? Well, it makes his loan that was 3 payments behind now current, and you're going to make his payment every month. You're actually improving his credit. Because if he lets it go to the bank and get foreclosed, what happens? His credit is destroyed. It's already shaky if he's 3 payments behind. You understand? Does that make sense? Okay. We'll talk about this more in the workshop. Okay, now what? How do I clear this? Eraser. We erase that little line there and that little line over there. Yeah, there we go. I'm not too good at this. Now what? So we've taken the property Now what? You could live in it. If you're looking for a house to buy to live in, what a great way to do it. My first house I bought to live in. I bought several investment properties before I bought my first personal residence. But my first personal residence I bought this way with no money down. The mortgage was 7.25% back then. This was in like 1994, I think. And the seller, it was a real nice property in Denver, and the seller just wanted out. And I said, fine, just transfer the deed over to me, and I will live in it, and I will make your payment. And she was fine. And the situation was her husband was terminally ill, and she had a business up in the mountains far away, and she was renting it out to somebody, and the tenant wasn't paying, and it was all kinds of expenses out of her pocket for repairs, and he had all kinds of medical bills which she couldn't afford, and she just didn't want to deal with it anymore. She was getting ready to just walk away because she didn't have a lot of equity in it. So I said, fine. I said, I don't care if it has equity. If you'll let me get in with no money and just take over your payment, I'll make payments on it. She said, fine. And she deeded it over to me. And then I lived in it for a couple of years and moved out and rented it for a long time and sold it many years later for a big profit. All right. So you can live in it. What a great way to buy a house. And by the way, the higher price you go up, the more houses you will find like this. So if the median price in your city is, let's say, 400 or 500, if you start looking at $800,000 properties, you'll find a lot more motivated sellers because those houses are harder to sell, especially if they have very little equity. But if they have a 2.8% mortgage, who cares if it has equity? What you want is a nice house you can get in with very little money or no money and just have a very low payment that you couldn't get from a lender. Right? Two, you could fix it up, sell it, pay off the loan. That's a short-term subject too. Number three, you could wholesale the deal to someone else. So let's say you found a deal like this and you could put it under contract and wholesale it to, let's say, me. Let's say it was a $1.5 million house. That's what I'd like to live in. Who wouldn't? Actually, in LA, I wouldn't. That'd be at least 5. But in Colorado Springs, 1.5 million gets you a pretty darn nice house. So you could wholesale it to another person who would take it over and then maybe get 10 grand for the wholesale fee. We'll talk about that this weekend a little more. You can keep it as a rental if it was a lower end property or the payment was low enough that you can make positive cash flow. And on a lower end, you can. On the $1.5 million property in an average price 500, probably not. Or you can resell it on what we call a wrap, which is short for wrap around, which is our next discussion. So what is a wrap? What does that mean? Before I explain that, let me back up and explain to you the dirty little secret that banks don't want you to know. So banks offer 4% or less in savings accounts. They lend it right back to the same customers often and other customers at 7% or more for mortgages or even higher for car loans or business loans. You understand that, first of all, when banks have gazillions of dollars on deposit in savings accounts, they don't have to keep that all in their vault. They can invest most of it because it's not 1929 where people are going to rush into the bank and all take their money out at once. So the feds require some reserve, but they don't require dollar for dollar. But the big thing is the way they get the money, besides borrowing it from the Federal Reserve, is they borrow it from their customers in the form of savings accounts. So you put money in a savings account and they give you 4%, and then you walk into the same bank, you get a loan for a car, and they charge you 10. You're losing 6 points. They're making 6% off of your money. More, actually, because they don't have to keep it all in reserve. But even if it was dollar for dollar, you understand that's the spread. Banks borrow money at this interest rate by having savings accounts, and then they lend it out at a higher rate, and that is the spread. And if you multiply that times, a few $1 trillion, that's a lot of money a day that they are making on that float of the money. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with real estate, but we're going to do it on steroids. Here's why. So a wrap, let's define it, is an owner financing transaction wherein a loan is created to wrap around an existing mortgage on the property. Wrap around an existing mortgage. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell the property for more than we bought it for on price. And then we're going to charge an interest rate that is close to market, so 6 or 7%, and then continue making payments on our underlying 3% mortgage. So we're catching not only the spread between 3 and 6 or 3 and 7, but the difference between the amount owed to us on the wrap versus what we owe, not technically we owe because we got it from somebody else, but what is owed on the property, I should say, at a lower interest rate. So you're leveraging both buy low, sell high, and borrow low or leverage low, sell at a higher interest rate. That is the wrap, my friend. So it looks kind of like this. We've got here a lender, oink, oink. Okay, so we took this property subject to an existing loan, let's say of 3%, and we're going to make that payment every month instead of the seller. We sell it at a higher price to a buyer on a wrap at 6 to 7%. And oftentimes what we do is we mark the price high, but charge a fairer interest rate than banks are charging. No points, no origination fees, no garbage fees that all these lenders charge. It's just X amount down, X amount a month. That's what people care about. And we're selling to buyers, obviously, who can't walk into a bank, put X amount down, and qualify for a loan. And it's often other entrepreneurs. So instead of 20% down, you could sell it for 10% down, which a lot of banks won't do. And we can charge them 6.5% interest, which is better than 7 or 7.25%, with no fees, really no fees. And it's still a deal for them because they're paying a below market interest rate, they're getting in without qualifying, et cetera, et cetera. And we're still making money because we bought it a little below market and sold it a little above. And then we're paying at 3% and we're charging 6 or 7. And there's a monthly spread, the payment that comes in on the wrap and the payment that goes out on the underlying subject to. Okay. So it's a real profitable proposition. If you look at a $300,000 or $400,000 property, you could take it subject to and rent it out and have positive cash flow if the underlying loan is only 3%. Not on an $800,000 property in most markets. But we can sell it on a wrap and collect positive cash flow on an $800,000 property. In fact, it could be on an $800,000 property, using this example, it'd be about $800 to $1,200 a month positive cash flow. Wow. $800 to $1,200. On a rental, you couldn't do that. You couldn't even break even. Even at 3%, you can barely break even. But on a wrap, you can collect $800 to $1,200 per property. Think about that. What if you did 10 deals over the next year that were bringing in $1,000 a month? By next year, you'd have 10 grand a month in passive income. And they're not tenants. They're buyers. What happens when something breaks? They have to fix it. You understand? You're collecting loan payments. You're like a lender. Once you buy the property and you sell it, you're a buyer, you're a seller, and now you're a lender. You're just collecting one payment in and the other one going out. It's a very high level strategy. I know some of you might be going, what the heck is he talking about? I'm confused. And that's perfectly okay to be there. Just sit with that for a little bit. Think about it, try to absorb it a little bit. And then, come to the workshop this weekend and we'll talk a little more about it. Okay, so the workshop is this weekend. Oh, look at that. It's 444. That's a lucky number, repeating force. What is it biblically? Let me see. 444 spiritual. Every time I see that all the time, and I always look it up. Here it goes. In spiritual interpretations, the number 444 signifies a period of significant change, transformation, and spiritual awakening. It's seen as a message from your angels indicating you are on the right path and that your prayers and intentions are being heard. I love it. I love it. So here we are, the Wealth Builders Real Estate Workshop. It's this weekend, April 25th through 27th. It's Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday morning till about noon or 1. You can scan this little QR code thingy with your phone or iPad. Frankly, I find these things, a little weird. Just go to wealthbuilders.org/events. So we're going to be covering all kinds of stuff at this event. Everything from, and this is just a partial list of topics. There's like 26 sessions or something like that over 3 days. Getting started, looking at our market prices, rents, best strategies for 2025 and beyond, finding deals, how to negotiate great deals, and even if you're in a seller's market. Creative financing, we'll talk more about, just like we talked about today. Tax liens, that's a great way to earn safe double-digit returns on your cash or your IRA money or your 401k money. Vacation rentals, how to cash flow with Airbnb and VRBO houses, asset protection, that's one of my topics. Talking about how to protect yourself and your family and your business from lawsuits, liability, taxes, and pass on your empire you're building for your grandchildren. Remember, Solomon said, the good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Amen, amen, amen. So you got to build something and learn how to leave it properly. Wealthbuilders.org/events. Let's see. Take action now. That's my last slide. I'm going to invite Karen back in and we'll do some Q&A.
Oh my gosh, Bill, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Something that really stood out to me, and Troy, you'll have, if Troy's on and not eating dinner, right? Here he is.
You
Thank
got a
you.
little something in your tooth there, Troy.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Oh, and there's Frank. Oh my gosh, we are so
Hey, Frank.
blessed.
Frank and I have, by the way, Frank and I have band practice tonight because on May 3rd, a little plug, for those of you who are in Colorado, Frank and I play in a rock and roll band together. And we're
You're
playing
awesome.
Saturday, May 3rd at the Metropolitan Cafe in Denver. It's in the Denver Tech Center. It's an upscale place. It's a restaurant slash bar, but it's family friendly and it's really nice. It's upscale. And the best part, because the people who like our music, old rock and roll, our age or older, and that generation's starting to go. Although, what's that game where you have that little plastic guitar called? Guitar Hero is bringing it back.
Yeah.
So we're playing 6:30 to 9. So you could be in bed by 10. And we
It's
hope to be in
awesome.
bed by 11.
If I was in town, I'd be there. We have to go to Minnesota,
Those
but
of you who are in Colorado, mark that
yes.
May 3rd, Saturday at the Metropolitan Cafe in the Denver Tech Center. So let's take some questions.
It's so good. Hey, I was just going to mention, and Troy, I'm going to ask you to chime in on this because this has been your story too. I really appreciated, Bill, how you were talking about when the market goes down, there's pressure to sell. And I think a lot of people right now are looking at the values of properties, but this is the worst time to sell if the market is down. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit from Troy on that. And then Bill, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on that too, because I think a lot of people are feeling that pressure.
yeah, it's definitely not a time to sell. It's a great time to buy. I'll give you just a quick example of a property I did. Back in 2009, I bought a little 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in Orlando for $10,000. Now,
What?
only $10,000.
On your American Express card, like
You
Bill?
overpaid.
I actually used a private investor who put up the 10,000. I paid him a flat rate of return on that, and then I turned around and sold that house for 25,000 and made. By the time I covered my expenses and everything, I made about $13,500 in profit on that.
You bet you regret selling
Now,
it.
I do regret selling it. It looked really good. It was 13 grand in profit, and it only took me about 2 weeks. That was a good turn. But that house today is worth almost $300,000.
Yeah.
So I wished I would have kept it. It would have been a lot more profitable if I'd hold on to it. So I can relate exactly to what you were saying, Bill. My mistake is I flipped too many. I didn't keep enough.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's really good. Bill, can you comment on that too? Because again, I feel like this is a pressure point a lot of people are feeling.
Well, it's again, like I said, it's market by market. Some markets I know in Texas are starting to soften and prices are going down. Like Austin, Texas, I know is softening.
Wow.
Colorado Springs, where we live, it's crazy good still. It's like one of the hottest markets in the country and with no end in sight. They're predicting like a 7% increase this year in Colorado Springs. Denver is a good, but not. But again, it's neighborhood by neighborhood, area by area. You can't
And
make
you know, it's up to price too.
yeah. So
Like,
it's like it's good either way. It's a win-win. Meaning, if your market is softening, it's a buying opportunity.
yeah,
If your market is still going up, well, what I just described, you're just going to get a higher price when you sell it. So, whether the market's up, down, or sideways, there's always money to be made. You know why? Because there's always individual people with problems that need solving. You
yeah.
can't, well, I can't say, Troy, I heard you're in financial trouble. Will you sell me your Google stock for half price? I can't do that. I got to buy it on the market, right, through a broker and pay market price. Not so with real estate. You can find individuals with problems that you can help them through and make money.
That's so helpful. And you know, too, sometimes when people are looking to sell and they're expecting a super high price, I was just thinking that the market tells you what price works for your
Right.
market. You can go for high and definitely do all you can to promote it that way. But
Market doesn't care.
really, yeah,
Market doesn't. So it's like that commercial. Shingles doesn't care.
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. All
But
right,
don't care what your problem is. They
great.
want to pay X.
All right, so here's some great questions, and Bill, I'll just send this to you. This is from Martha, and she says, how can we locate those types of sellers?
Well, we're going to talk about that this weekend,
Yeah.
but I'll give you one good one. People who are in foreclosure. People who are in foreclosure are facing a sale. They're more than willing to sell you their house this way because it bails them out of the foreclosure and sometimes could put money in their pocket. Not always, sometimes.
That's super helpful. Okay, this is from Jeff. Great question. Do you have any recommendations on how to find private investors?
Yeah, everybody asks that and they think there's a magic pool of private investors. There isn't.
How do
That's
you find them though?
well, it's relationship building is what it is. You have a plan or a property that you need money for, and you go start with friends and family and coworkers, and then once you've borrowed from them and paid them back, they're going to tell their friends and their relatives. You build it that way. It's a relationship building thing. People think there's a secret list of private investors. There aren't.
It's relationship is what you're saying.
Yes.
Very good. All right, this is a great question from Tori. She says, why would someone walk away from a home with their name still on the mortgage when they don't know what may happen with the loan or, oh, sorry, or or what if they want to buy another property years later?
Right. Well, that's a compound question. I'll answer the first half because we're limited on time. Why would someone do this? Think about this. Let's say A and B are married, husband and wife, both on the deed, both on the loan. They get a divorce. And let's say husband agrees as part of the divorce settlement, he's going to deed his half to the wife. He's still on the loan, remember? And she's now the sole owner. And the promise in the agreement is after, let's say, 3 years, she'll refinance or sell the property and get him off the loan. That's the only way to get him off because the bank's not taking him off. And she defaults after a year and the property goes into foreclosure. What is husband's recourse? None. He gave away ownership of his property and he's still on the hook. Why would someone do this? It's insanity. It happens every single day of the week.
Wow.
You'd be surprised. So obviously that husband was motivated, and getting the divorce settled was more important than the realities of deeding away a property
Yeah.
still on the hook for. Same thing, sellers have problems financially, emotionally, relationship. There's all kinds of reasons.
That's so good. Thank you. All right, this is from Sheila, and it's the same kind of question. Like, how do you find these people? You mentioned foreclosures. Is there another way? And Frank and Troy, please chime in too. How do we find these people?
You got to advertise.
Yeah,
Right.
most don't know that there's a solution to their problem.
Right.
They're dead in the water, they think.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have talked about too, like to look for properties that have been on the market a long time. They're not lowering their price. There is a website. I'm trying to think what it is. I can share it this weekend if you guys come. That shows like VA loans that are assumable. But a lot of times you've got people in situations where they do not want to, or they, for whatever reason, cannot accept less on their property. So if you come in this way and you give them the price they're looking for and you get a lower interest rate, you're fine. It's just numbers, but in their perception, they're getting what they want.
Right. Right. I'll give you a prime example of that. I'm under contract on a property now in Colorado Springs, a new residence. So
Art.
I'll give the scenario. So the seller has a VA loan. Her husband tragically committed suicide like 2 months after they moved in 3 years ago. She hasn't made a payment in 3 years. Now, I don't know why the VA hasn't foreclosed yet, but they haven't started foreclosure. I can't explain it. Usually they're pretty quick with that. But her loan is 3.4%. So they were advertising it as a short sale, meaning you offer what you want, and the bank is owed much more than that, but the bank will take less. And if they do, the deal is yours. So I called the listing agent and I said, how much is she behind? Because I figured like 3 or 4 months. 130 grand. If that's still on the price of the property was less than the 20% I'd have to put down for a loan, right? If I wanted to get a new loan, plus was 3.4%. Right? So I said, I'll make up the back payment, I'll pay your realtor, and I'll put 10 grand in your pocket. Because on a short sale, the seller's not allowed to receive any money. The lender's not taking a discount and saying, oh, you're walking away with money from this? No way. Right? So if she does a short sale, that hurts her credit, which is already hurt because she hasn't made payments in 3 years. She said, no, I need my VA eligibility so I can get another VA loan. And I'm thinking, lady, who the heck is going to give you a loan? You're 3 years in arrears.
No way.
So we agreed on a short sale, which means I'm paying less for the property, but I still have to get a new loan, which is at 7% or more, right? So now I find out she files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which has taken another 300 points off her credit. So now I left a message with the listing agent again saying, can we go back to the first deal? Because nobody's going to give this lady a loan with a bankruptcy and a short sale and 3 years of no payments anyway. But she said, just to show you the thinking of a seller, why would they do this? Like in her mind, I'd rather have all this bad stuff on my credit than lose my VA eligibility for a new loan. Crazy. That's just, people's priorities are all mixed up when they're emotional.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that came into Sherry. Thank you for that. She's just wondering if this strategy that you described works on a short sale.
If they're listed and advertised as a short sale and they don't owe like significantly more than the property is worth, in this case, the property is worth still more than the lender is owed, but she's been trying to sell it for 3 years with no luck. So if you see a property advertised as short sale, just pick up the phone and call the listing agent and say, how much do they owe and what is the interest rate? Because sometimes it may make sense to just make up the back payments and take it over subject to the existing mortgage, then try to negotiate with the lender on a low percentage chance that they're going to take 100 grand less than they're owed.
Yeah, that's really good. Sheila is wondering, and this is a great question, is do you have to travel to different states to basically make the numbers work?
Maybe. I've done it. I've bought properties in 12 states, probably 8 of which I've never been to.
Well, Bill, we're working with someone right now that's buying vacation rentals in Alabama.
That's right. Well, she's
And
been there. She's
yeah,
visited, but once she gets the lay of the land and buys her first property or two, she's not going to keep visiting. So it's
this
possible. And she has friends and relatives that live close by that can keep an eyeball. So if you're from Dayton, Ohio, and you want to buy properties there, and now you live in Dallas, well, you used to live in Dayton, you kind of know the lay of the land. So it's possible.
Yep. Yeah, so I find that interesting because if you, in a lot of our coaching family does this, they may live here, they may live somewhere else. But if you're willing to look at another area, there are areas that you can get into properties a lot less than Colorado Springs, for example, Denver, or where we're at down in Cocoa Beach. And the numbers can work. I mean, Dan Dyer's a great example of this. He's in, Duggar, Indiana, right? We have someone on from that. So
Yeah.
he was able to build, like, you're not in a big appreciation market,
Right.
but if you're after cash flow, there are options available if you're open to it.
Right. And
So
this strategy I discussed tonight, it works in LA. It works in San Francisco. It works even better
where,
because Oklahoma is $1.8 million. The cash flow is not $1,200 a month on that. It's like $3,000 a month. I'm jealous of those numbers. But it works just as well, if not better, on higher end homes where you can't rent it to break even.
yeah, yeah. Well, this has been amazing, you guys. Thank you so much. Bill, you've opened possibilities for us. And we talked, like Billy's really talking a lot about getting a new wineskin, which is really about expanding your ability to think of possibilities so that God can pour in and bless it. So I just want to thank you so much for that. Troy,
Pleasure.
any final comments that you might have?
No, just quit asking why somebody would do something. Just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean they could. Open your mind to the possibilities. God would want to prosper you, but you've got to be open to receive it.
Amen. So true. Frank?
I've been with Bill for over 20 years and I've seen this happen. It's not pie in the sky stuff. It happens all the time. So you just got to put in a little effort and you have to be educated and you have to have good guidance.
Yes.
That's what it takes.
Absolutely.
It does. It's a perseverance and it's just awesome. I'm so good. Thankful for all of you and for all of you with our Wealth Builders family that you tuned in. We can't wait to see you this weekend. And if you have not yet registered, please do so. When you go to the website, you're going to see that only live streams available because we are sold out. Yes, but I want to let you know that you will receive 3 weeks to be able to watch it. We are going to bring you in as a part of it. We'll have you in the Q&A. So just because you're on live stream doesn't mean that you won't be able to engage. So we can't wait to see all of you this weekend. And I can't wait to see you, Bill, Troy, and Frank in person this weekend. And thanks to all of you, our Wealth Builders family, our Wealth Builders team behind the scenes. We love and appreciate you so much. God bless and have an amazing rest of your night. We'll see you this weekend. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.